Hello, thank you. Let's talk about the future. Who knows what this is? Come on, you must have seen this. Somebody must know what this is. No? Yeah, I'm hearing it. It's the first real live quantum computer designed or developed by IBM. But it was designed by MAP and Universal Design Studios, who are newly part of the AKQA family. MAP is an engineering and IoT firm. Universal Design Studios is an architecture and interior design firm. And the reason why we are welcoming these two amazing studios to the AKQA family is because we believe that the future of design transcends the screen. We're all used to digital design impacting on all these different screens, but obviously it's clear to most of us that we're moving beyond the screen now. I'm pretty old, so when I was 20, there was no real internet. There were no mobile phones. And if you told me that in just a few years there would be a supercomputer in my pocket, and if I left home, I wouldn't really have to worry about where I was going. This computer would just tell me where I was going to go and where the traffic was, and it would also tell me whether I needed to take an umbrella, exactly when it was going to rain, whether I needed to unfold the umbrella even. It would connect me to friends all over the world, just stay in touch every day. It would notify my house when I arrived to say that to warm it up for me. It would open my car door for me when I approached the car. Well, I mean, in reality, I have an old Volvo, so I have to open my own car door. But, if I had spent a little bit more money on the car, then I could have had an automatically opening car door. So you're all going, that's not really innovation. That's just like Google, Alexa, all of those things. I thought you were going to talk about the future. And I would say that is how the future is designed. You basically... Oh, I should have put this on mute, this video, but... Luckily, I only hear it here in the background. People come up with these ridiculous ideas. Most of them fail, and the ones that do achieve success get there by failing first 20,000 times. Everybody calls them an idiot. Innovation for a very long time is just a lot of really hard work. And then all of a sudden, when it succeeds, it's actually normal, and everybody goes, yeah, that's just Google. And that's still how it works, right? I mean, you probably recognize these guys. Most real innovation is delivered by people like this. But then there's another thousands of people that don't get as famous as these guys, don't get as successful as these guys. And they all contribute to this moment where all of you are going, it's normal. And the same thing will happen with, flying cars and with real interactive computers that understand what, who you are and what you want, like in this movie Her, and self-driving cars, and flights to Mars, and hydroponic gardens and vertical gardening, and flowering deserts, and solar-powered everything. Maybe. Or maybe... it's more this kind of stuff. It's just kind of ridiculous and it won't work, and then something else will come along that we don't really know about yet, and then that will work, and that will be amazing. So as an agency, as an innovation consultancy, how do you ride that wave of 20,000 people failing? It's not really up to us as AKQA. I'll quickly introduce us for those of you who don't know us. We're a global design innovation consultancy. We have about 2,000 people in 26 countries across the world. We're also based here in Amsterdam, where I run experience design for Amsterdam, and I'm also responsible for Europe. And we invent the future with our clients. That's our motto. We invent the future with our clients. The word "with" there is really almost as important as the word "future." because we really do it together, and I'm going to talk a little bit about exactly how we do that. But one thing that we can't really afford to do is fail 20,000 times. You know, you can't really do that when you're an agency of a certain scale. You can't really go and say, well, we tried, it was nice, somebody will probably pick this idea up in the future and do something cool with it. But the other thing that we really don't want to do, that it's incredibly important to stay away from, is kind of innovation for innovation's sake. You know, just making CEOs feel good about themselves. You know, like greenwashing. This is like innovation washing, and there are companies who just do innovation for its own sake, and it doesn't really go anywhere, and it also doesn't contribute to how we feel about ourselves, and it doesn't contribute to business results. So, you know, how do you stay away from innovation washing, innovation that doesn't really do anything, and how do you avoid falling into the trap of innovation that probably fails? You know, so in the 5.5, coming up to about 6 years, which is a lot. Agency years are like dog years. So being at an agency for 6 years, almost 6 years, feels for me, you know, there must be a reason why I'm here. And one of the reasons is because we work for these amazing clients, and I've personally witnessed and even been a part of many innovations that really brought the future closer to the now, and was part of that transition from that's a ridiculous idea to that's normal. In Amsterdam, we worked with Philips to help them really think about how can we turn all these products that we create into connected products. So we did work on lots of different products. One of these projects resulted ultimately in a hardware and software ecosystem for pregnant mothers and babies. In Berlin, we worked with Audi to create Audi On Demand, which is like a concierge service for car hire. Hire anything from an A2 to an R8. And then we scaled that, took it to China, scaled it, and turned it into a fleet management tool. With Paris, we worked with Eurostar to build this underwater VR adventure for children. Because when you're under the sea in a train, it's actually not that cool. But when you wear this, suddenly it becomes amazingly cool. And sticking to the theme of VR, we worked with Google in Italy to create an adventure to take people through this massively interesting and rich history of Italy, its art and its culture, to reintroduce people to Italian art and culture through VR. And as a result of doing this kind of work, we've become quite known for being able to deliver these ideas and also deliver them at scale. So Gardner last year, it's coming up again. I hope we're going to stay in the same position this year as last year, but we were super excited and happy to see that we ranked all the way at the top right in terms of, you know, completeness of vision and ability to execute. So I've been part of a lot of these projects, and I want to talk today about one of those projects that, to be honest, has been, for me personally, the coolest project I've done in my career to date. The client is Siemens Building Technologies. Now, most people know Siemens. Many people will probably think about Siemens as, you know, vacuum cleaners or washing machines. In reality, Siemens is this massive company who do lots of things. A lot of this is B2B. Siemens Building Technologies is a B2B company. Essentially, their core business is to heat and cool and shade big buildings, especially office buildings. And I'm going to use this project to take you through a series of principles. I'm not really going to deep dive on our methodology because that's going to get very boring very quickly for most of you. For some of you, it'll get very exciting. But you can come up to me and talk to me afterwards. But I'm going to drill down to some real principles that help us develop and design the future without failing 20,000 times. And the first principle is you really need a great brief. A great brief usually doesn't come directly from the client. You have to co-create this. So the brief that comes from the client is the starting point, and then you turn that into something that is more exciting. A great brief has two components, an existential threat and an exponential opportunity. Existential threat It can be a new technology or a competitor or a new entrant to the market that really disrupts and impacts on your business. And an exponential opportunity is an opportunity to make a lot of money really quickly. For instance, by tapping into a new market segment, or by just reinventing yourself in a new direction that opens up opportunities. So in the case of Siemens, the existential threat was IoT. Their business, as I mentioned, is heating and shading. They have a big basement or a big computer in the basement. They have a bunch of sensors in the building, and together that helps to shade and cool and heat your building with the minimum amount of energy. So the system essentially pays for itself. It's a massively productive and beneficial system, generates a lot of money, is very successful. But the threat is Internet of Things. All these sensors now have their own little computer, and they talk to each other, and pretty soon you don't need that big computer in the basement anymore. And you don't really maybe even need that expertise anymore, because the systems can optimize themselves over time, and all you need is an installer to put up some sensors, and off you go. So that's a threat that they saw coming. The opportunity, the exponential opportunity, is moving from the utility space, which is maybe 1% of the total money that a company spends, into the people space, which is where almost all of the rest goes. So those kinds of briefs are really cool, right? You can do great work with less scary briefs, but this definitely opens the door to some really big thinking. So we set to work, we started ideating. First of all, we have really strong technology people, so they started working with the Siemens technologists to really look at the Siemens technology stack, the landscape, other IoT players, existing players, and so forth. But that really will only get you to a sort of a base understanding. It doesn't open up the opportunity space. So we also used lots of different types of research methodologies to find out what drives people. How can we create value for people? I think the previous speaker really talked about how important it is to do something that is really that really adds value, and that really comes from empathy and understanding of users. And I couldn't agree with that more. So we used different technologies, and I won't again go into the detail because you guys are way too hip for that. Not nerdy enough for my crowd. But suffice to say that we don't really ask people what they say they want, because you're going to get some interesting answers there. And there's nothing wrong necessarily with it, but you're not going to get the really massively interesting answers, the stuff that opens up these exponential opportunities. So we try to go more into the space of what people intuitively know, or what they feel, or what they dream about, where their ambition is. And that is, for me, really the second principle that I want to share, because we do this time and time again. We try to get beyond the obvious. We all know the quotes from Henry Ford and Steve Jobs, who essentially all say, well, you can ask people what they want, but you're not going to get a very interesting answer. If you find out what really motivates and drives people, then you get much more interesting answers. So, a second principle for us. So then we get to what do you do with all that research? Well, in a traditional ad agency, all research kind of builds up to this single insight, this beautiful, shining, amazing insight, and then everything stems from there. You can tell from my voice that I'm a little bit sarcastic about that. I don't really believe in these singular insights. They're almost always nonsense. Instead, we try to create opportunity spaces. And opportunity spaces can be like insights in that they have this kind of tension in them, but they can also be a little bit more prosaic. But we try to combine, for instance, cultural insights, much more sort of functional insights, these kind of deeper understandings of behavior and motivations, and we end up with actually, for those who really looked, there are actually only 8 opportunity spaces. I duplicated one because it looks nicer in a grid. 8 opportunity spaces. And just to zoom in on 2 of them really quickly, and to give you a bit of an understanding of what that gets you. So I really like this one, the continuum between chaos and control. And it's a good example of what I was talking about between the obvious, the explicit answers that you might get and the implicit ones. Because if you ask people, what do you want in the office? Then they'll say, I want more control. I want more control of my working environment. I want to be in charge, essentially. But actually what you find is that chaos, which lies on the other side, also really contributes to work. There's the serendipitous encounters, the unexpected, random stuff that maybe interrupts you, but then sort of puts your brain on a different track, and all of a sudden you're doing something that's more interesting. You shouldn't just design for control. You should leave a little bit of room for chaos. Another one that I really love is enabling feedback and co-owning improvement, which is about how much people annoy each other. People really do, in the office, get on each other's nerves a lot. And you're probably all familiar with this, and particularly around noise. So people are very bothered by the noise that other people make, but they also make noise themselves, and they don't really realize it when they're doing it. And then even though they're really annoyed with the noise that other people are making, they also don't really want to call them out on it, because then you're this whiny guy that always, keep it down a little bit. So, how can you design, how can you mediate between all of those difficult and fractious things that are going in the office? Those are the kinds of things that really, make a designer's heart beat faster, because then you can start to do something. So you can start to ideate. And again, I think some of the common themes that we see in the conference here is that ideation is not something that you should do alone. It's something that you should do together with your client, because we're getting closer and closer to the heart of our client's business. We're no longer doing something off on the side. We're doing something that's very much core to what our client's business is, and therefore we can't afford to just do that stuff on our own. We really need to involve them. So in this case, we went to Zug, this beautiful little village, full of very rich people in the financial industry in Switzerland. And here was the ultimate irony. This company, whose job it is literally to make offices nice and cool when it's hot, were in the process of transitioning to another office, and their old office, where we were still working, was crazy hot. I mean, it was like 30 degrees outside and probably like 40 degrees inside. So we spent a week there working with a bunch of techies from them, from us, business strategy, service designers, visual designers, just coming up with a bunch of different ideas, helping to draw out ideas from clients using different design thinking tools. We created a bunch of prototypes, for instance, to help to maybe like a desk that calls out to you when you walk up to it to know that this particular hot desk is yours for the day. We did a bunch of testing. We played around with this idea of noise. How can the space give feedback about the noise that is being generated? How can maybe the light color can change when the noise level changes, so people get a sort of a visual cue that they're making noise. We played around with feedback systems that allowed co-workers to give each other positive reinforcement. Interactive desks. We built some hardware prototypes where you could literally, projection map onto a desk, and it would see your hand moving up and down. And so a lot of kind of big chunky ideas, roughly prototyped, just to push into the space. And this is the next principle that I want to talk about is, when you're doing this kind of stuff, when you're in this phase of the project where you're really exploring this massive big space, then you really need to push beyond the safe ground. And this is a bit of a tightrope with clients, because you're involving them, and you can't come up with nonsense ideas, with crazy stuff. But they're also not paying you to stop at the obvious stuff. So how do you navigate that? And you need to start pretty ambitious to end up with something that's still interesting. If you start with something that's interesting, then you probably end up with something that's pretty vanilla. We then created this vision film to help push this understanding of the opportunities of the smart office into the rest of the company, who weren't really thinking about these kind of occupant-centric opportunities. So this is where it needs to start to look a little bit nice, a little bit polished, so that people go like, wow, this is amazing. Are we doing this? Yes, you're doing this, almost. And so all of this is completely made up, of course. We've prototyped it, but we haven't validated anything. So, immediately we need to move on to the next principle, which is it doesn't mean shit if nothing gets built. So all of this stuff is great and it's important. It's good to get this thinking out there and to socialize it inside the company, but then let's build something. So we went to Berlin into this incredibly hip-looking environment. It was a co-working space in East Berlin. We wanted to move the first product a little bit outside of the Siemens corporate space, because then you get sort of sucked into the day-to-day, and if you want to do something new, then you need to create a little bit of room for that. So we had a bunch of Siemens people, technology people, product owners, a bunch of AKQA people, designers, technology people, and we started to build this MVP. And we thought, okay, we can't build all of this stuff. We need to take a first slice. So we thought, what's one really nice, horrible problem that we can start to push into and solve for people that fits into the broader strategy? And we thought, how about meetings? Let's kill all meetings. That was maybe a little bit too radical, so then we refined it and we said, okay, let's instead of killing all meetings, let's create a meeting booking system that allows you to reduce all these unnecessary meetings, maybe remove them altogether, and improve the productivity or improve the result of the meetings that you do need to go to. So we worked on this, iteratively in sprints, all of the good stuff that you can imagine. And we got to a product that looks pretty nice here, but really it wasn't even really an MVP, it was just a beta. But of course, we got to the point where we can start getting feedback from people. So we put this into the Berlin office, got a bunch of feedback. Some things worked really well, some things didn't work very well at all, but that's the point of making a product and putting a product in people's hands really quickly. And then something interesting happened. Before something, I need to hurry it up a little bit. There's one thing that I've forgotten. Well, this was also interesting. But we found that while we were doing this product development, people were getting impatient because there's all these internal stakeholders that really want to see this stuff speed up. So you need to create some speedboats before you can turn this big ocean liner, this big corporate behemoth into a new direction. You need to test a little bit what's out there. So we use a process called an edge sprint for that, where we start with something that looks a bit like a Google design sprint. Then we have about 2-3 weeks of prototyping to make it look really nice, make it look like a real product. And then we do some validation and some prioritization. So really you just sprinting ahead to look at of the future of this product that you haven't even validated the first piece of. But it's playing chess on many boards at the same time. You can't expect a big company to just patiently wait for your product to slowly mature. You need to create a couple of speedboats to make that look effortless. And so we did that. We looked at the sort of activity-based working space and what happens if all these sensors and all this technology, all this hardware that Siemens have starts to get plugged into the system. What opportunities does that open up? And it looked a little bit like this. You can look for your colleagues. You can find spaces to do different kinds of work in. You can manipulate the space that you're in terms of changing the light, changing the settings. You can order food when you're having a meeting. You have access control that gets you into the building, but maybe can also unlock a locker for you. So somebody from Deliveroo or from Amazon can deliver something and you can pick it up. And this is where the interesting thing happened that I thought I was in before. And that's Siemens said, okay, we get it. We're going to do this. So then this big company that you think maybe is a little bit corporate and a little bit slow turns out to be very fast moving. They can really take decisions when it's needed. And so they went out and bought 2 startups, sensor-based startup called Enlighted and Comfy, which is an occupant-centric startup who initially their focus is on heating and cooling your space, but you have to control yourself. And you can democratically decide how warm or how cold it needs to be. But our ambition is much bigger, is much more into the smart office space. So they were really already sort of halfway into that direction that Siemens wanted to go, and they said, okay, let's go. And the other cool thing was that we had created so much trust with Siemens, and when we also saw that that prototype that I just showed you had been really important in the negotiations between Comfy and Siemens, where Comfy went like, okay, I thought you guys were really, a big corporate, but actually you're trying to do the same thing as we are. So there was also a lot of trust from the Comfy people in us. And so we went to Silicon Valley for the final piece of the puzzle, and worked with the team at Comfy on another edge sprint. And it was really cool to shift from this kind of corporate working structure to this startup working structure, all still going after the same thing, but with a different perspective, different types of people. And again, the point of this edge sprint was to look at the future of the product and taking into account the internal priorities. So they had a certain set of needs that they knew that their buyers had. And they also were pitching towards this activity-based workspace, so where people don't have their own desk, people, generally creative people, higher educated people who have different spatial needs throughout the day. So how do you quickly show what that might look like? Now, unfortunately, as you can maybe imagine, this is the one piece that I can't really show you because, of course, there's a lot of confidentiality around this. What I can show you, though, is this quote. Before I do, sorry, I clearly should have looked at the slides one more time before I got up. But there's first the final principle. This prototype, even though I can't show it to you, looked really great. And it should look great. So when you make a prototype, and there's been a lot of talk about quick and dirty prototyping, and I get that, and we also do quick and dirty prototyping, and it's great, but it doesn't really get you very far beyond, just exploring something really quickly, and it's good for that. But almost always a prototype really needs to look like a real product. It needs to feel like a real product, and that's where you get the proper feedback that you're looking for from users, from internal stakeholders. A prototype needs to look really good. And this is the slide that I thought was coming up. This is the one thing that I can show you, the quote from our client there, VP of Design, that said, "You'll be happy to know that Comfy Vision demo continues to be a huge hit and is getting regular showcasing in sales pitches almost every day now. It's starting to heavily inform the roadmap of 2019 too." I think I saw a speaker yesterday who had a wonderful quote from Peter Drucker that said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it, and that's kind of what we're doing in this particular space. So it's very exciting to see that, to get these kinds of quotes back. And really, that's where I want to end. I think we see this as not an isolated case. We don't think, well, that was a great project. Now we're going to do something over here that's completely different. I mean, sure, we'll do lots of different types of stuff, but we really see this as a flagship project which is representative of where the world is going, where digital is going. We think that there was this wonderful article from Kevin Kelly about augmented reality, the mirror world, in Wired magazine. You should read it, where there's this lens, this digital lens that we have now on the physical world, and there's all these sensors that understand who we are and where we are. It's completely, opening up completely new paradigms about UX and interaction design. So we think that this is a wonderfully exciting and amazing space, and we'll hopefully continue to create the future with our clients in that particular space. Thanks very much. Thank you.